Okay, very good evening, Rajneesh.
Good evening, Arun.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to have you on this show today. And I really welcome you for this particular program that we have been talking over, I think, a couple of weeks. And thanks for you to give your time on this show.
No, I'm really happy and excited to be here chatting with you. And my apologies for the fact that in December I had to bail at the last minute. Something came up. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here today with you.
Excellent. So I'm sure we have been talking to our audience for quite some time, and a lot of things have been taught about. And the topic is also very exciting because leadership, we have talked a lot in the past about leader versus manager. We talked about bosses, we talk about, but I think this topic I wanted you to talk more because one, the future of work and leadership skills. So a lot of concepts are going on for ages. Today we are talking about uh, chatbots, we are talking about AI, we are talking about chat GPT, what not is happening. So what is all the relevance? So this is all we want to hear from you. But before that, before we really jump into it, I want the audience to know a bit about who you are, what you do, what is your background, because a lot of people may not know. And in this show, I want them to know a lot about you.
Oh, well, so I've had a checkered innings across multiple industries. And after my engineering and my MBA way back in 1986, I joined up as a management trainee with Hindustan Lever. And then got immediately posted to their foods and drinks part of the business, which is Lipton. Then it became Brook Bond Lipton, and finally got folded into Levers. Uh, and had, and then I quit Levers to join Best Foods, which is another food company from US, only for it to be acquired by Unilever 3 years later, and I was back in Unilever. And and that's when I decided to take a change of sector, and I joined up with Max Hospitals here in Delhi in the early days when hospital was being set up. And that was driven more by a desire to figure out an aspect of marketing, which I knew I wouldn't get much exposure to in the consumer world, which is direct marketing. And, and that's what you would get in the services sector. And hospital opportunity came up, and Aljit had a very strong vision to create an institutional brand, which could perhaps become stronger than the doctor brand, which is how healthcare has traditionally been in India. And had a very, very exciting time in the first 3 years there with a very, very smart bunch of people coming from multiple industries, led by Noni Chawla, who came from the hospitality industry into that sector. Uh, After that, I joined up with a friend of mine as a junior partner in a direct marketing company. And after 3 years of that, he sold it off to Publicis, and I got back to the corporate world with Becton Dickinson. So
Okay.
stuck to the knitting of being in healthcare, but now from the other side of the table, from hospitals, which is the companies which sell into hospitals. And I had about 7 years with Best Foods, heading their business which was to do with drug delivery consumables.
Okay.
After that, I left to be on my own as an independent consultant, working with mid-size and smaller companies to help them grow their businesses by looking at new initiatives.
Okay.
And one such client was last year was Orchid, with whom I worked for about a year on multiple aspects of building out a strategy. And at the end of the process, when everything got approved and I thought my consulting work was done, they turned around and made an offer for me to come and join full time to help them set up this BU or this division for domestic formulations business. So that's my professional innings. Married, 2 kids, daughter is working in Bombay right now and plans to go for an MBA. Son is still in third year of college, undergrad, and we live here in South Delhi for the last 22 years.
Excellent. That's wonderful to great knowing you. And I can very well see and that coming from an FMCG, then hospitals, then typically consulting. So you have a full rounded personality with respect to this industry that you have experienced. And I have seen very few leaders who have walked in from an FMCG model to a pharma or a healthcare sector. So that's really a great step that has happened to this industry, I would say.
And I think I would give a lot of credit for that thought process to the leaders at Becton Dickinson at that time. And my predecessor into this business joined them from Britannia, and he moved on to do well within the company. And then I came in from, and again, an FMCG background. And the ability to an industry at that time which was seen as very, very siloed. People grew within that industry from frontline sales to middle sales management and then to BU heads.
Yeah.
And to look at people from across the industry to bring in that profile was, I think, I would say nothing short of visionary of the leaders at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it clicked and it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing this. Now I have got something before we really again jump into the topic. I still have two very important critical questions because um, so I know a lot of people when they change over and they move to a new role with a new organization, they take their time. But I think I heard that you have, and I've seen also, you have took a little longer time to update your profile on LinkedIn. And I think you have just recently did that. So that is, I want to know as a curiosity why. And two
Okay.
is, if you want to answer that. And
No, absolutely. Yeah.
second, I saw that when you write Orchid, you also write AMS. So this
Right.
is not sure what exactly you want to talk about through AMS. So
Right.
these two areas I want to understand first.
Right. So I guess the first part of the answer to why I didn't update it immediately when I joined here, which is about 3 months ago, and is probably, I think everybody feels that their strategy and their approach to business is so unique and earth-shattering. Maybe the rest of the world doesn't think so, but we did think that we have a unique opportunity and a unique approach. And to some extent, there was a desire from the company side and my side to keep our attempt to enter the domestic market in the product categories that we are a bit under the radar till we were closer to our launch. And that was the reason really to not to sort of really announce it. Of course, as time goes on, as through you, we have met a lot of candidates for various positions. I think the story is already out and we are talking to vendors and manufacturers and so on. So I think we are past the stage where we're really trying to keep the lid on that news that we're looking to re-enter this market. So that was really the reason. And I think the time was right to now put it up. It was a trade-off between, I understand by not putting it up, many of the candidates might have also felt that, Rajneesh is here interviewing me for this role and he himself is not updated it. So what's happening? So that was really the countervailing factor, which then made me go ahead and put it up.
Okay, wonderful. And the second part, what is AMS? Because Orchid is a familiar name. I come from the pharma industry and I know this name in the past. A lot of time it has come across, but this is like AMS. So what exactly, if you want, if it allows you to speak on that?
No, sure. I will not dwell too much in detail on it, but just a brief, we'll give you a full form of that abbreviation. One, Orchid has an existing business, which was largely around bulk for exports. And there was a need to differentiate this new division from the existing business. So we wanted to coin an internal term and an internal division around so that the two parts of the two legs of the business are completely distinguishable. And the AMS really stands for antimicrobial solutions because as you might remember that Orchid was known for its antibiotics, particularly cephalosporins. And cephalosporin class of drugs, particularly the injectable part, is not an easy product to make. It is till date one of two plants in Asia which are US FDA approved for cephalosporin injectables. And their plant in Chennai continues to do very well. And that's the category of products which we'll be launching again in the domestic market after being out of it for many years. So AMS stands for antimicrobial solutions.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing these details. I know these are real behind the scenes, but still I thought my curiosity was more. So let's come to our topic today. I'm sure a lot of audience, particularly I think a lot of middle managers, senior managers, and the young generation, which is like, I think born on the chat GPTs of the world and the kind of AIs which is happening. And that's something for us a long many years back when Google came into and we thought that we got a lot of solutions for them. It is like a chat GPTs of the world. So I want to first understand, according to your understanding, what are the trends that are happening that are shaping the future of the work? I think that is something, a question in the minds of people with respect to what they are doing today.
Yeah, so we all read so many articles and so many gurus across the world talking about the same topic, and at the end of the day, the one line answer is that it is a cliche, and like most cliches, which are true. I think we are in a world with accelerating VUCA. It's a constant and accelerating VUCA situation where we just have to accept it. It's not there's not that there's short periods of uncertainty and volatility and ambiguity which will settle down into a new norm.
Yeah.
The new norm itself is constant change.
Yeah.
And this change is happening across many, many dimensions. So like you said, one is technology, right? I remember I'm from a time when we started a career with large sheets of paper to manually compile the weekly sales,
Correct.
right? This was before even desktops were on our tables.
Yes.
And that too in the top companies like Levers and Nestle's of the world, which is
Yeah.
late 80s and early 90s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then Lotus happened, and then emails happened, and so many things which are now taken for granted. Can't imagine life without it. And I guess AI and ChatGPT will soon be like that.
Yeah.
And it's important for every person in the workforce to sort of adapt and adopt to those. It will be a struggle for many, and it has been at various technology jumps which have happened. So that's one thing which will accelerate in future also, both the nature of the technologies and the impact of those technologies. At the same time, those who embrace it will look at new opportunities emerging out of it. For example, if augmented reality and virtual reality starts getting accepted, then it certainly eliminates a lot of the disadvantages of remote meetings like the one we are having right now, right? And in professional context and in work context also.
Yeah.
So that's one big change. The other big change is that a much more diverse workforce within the same company across generations. I mean, without getting into the terms assigned to various generations of X, Y, Z, and so on, but the fact is that you can see it in any workplace you go. And it's not necessarily age; it's often a mindset which characterizes that generation, right? There may be a 45-year-old whose mindset may be more orthodox than say a 55, 60-year-olds. So that's the other aspect, that you have 22-year-olds coming in with a very different worldview and a very different approach to life and to work.
Yeah.
And that's on the other hand, you have 50 years old and 60-year-old people of a different time still trying to work together in an environment which is churned by technology, right? The different attitudes to life, different attitudes to work that they bring will force a lot of adaptation across not just top to bottom as it used to happen in a traditional hierarchy, but a lot of learning from bottom to top. Lots of things which seniors will learn from the juniors who have come in, particularly when it comes to social mores and diversity and acceptance of diversity across a range of aspects where diversity is becoming important. And some of those aspects touch deep-rooted and deep-seated worldviews, right? But at least the left brain and the rational side of us starts accepting the need for that adaptation. Each one of us will go through our own journey of actually really from within accepting it. So that's a struggle which one has to be conscious of at various levels.
Yeah.
Globalization is an ongoing one. It will keep increasing the linkages between industry. And linked to that is also the mobility of talent. And we touched upon mobility of talent within the country, but across industries, like I did across 2 or 3 industries. And in my consulting world, I worked with a couple of other industries. It's only when you have this mobility that you start really appreciating that a lot more things are similar between industries than they are different. And people and businesses which stay within a silo find it difficult to sort of accept that there's always this feeling that, oh, I'm unique and my industry is unique and what works there won't work here. So the more that people experiment with that and some of this mobility of talent which force that to happen, which is for the good. And finally, I think the hybrid work environment is here to stay. People have tasted the benefits of taking away 2-3 hour commute time and plowing it either into work or into personal life, and both of which are the 2 buckets you want to invest and not just spending it on the road. So I think these are some of the big high level changes that I can think of.
Yeah, excellent. I think I totally take those points, high level of technology, more VUCA world, diversity for sure, and talent cross-pollination is definitely and boundaryless markets, I would say. People are across, globe, and intellect is definitely going to be a big thing, which is growing day by day, as I also see when the younger generation comes and challenges you that, that's the traditional way of doing things and these are some new things. So you have to have that adaptability, what you said is something that really makes a point.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, keeping that changes and the kind of ask this new work environment is looking forward to, with your experience from your 80s, 90s, and now the 30, 40 years that you have spent, tell me what kind of leadership skills will remain relevant or will be most important in the coming years to happen in all your 40 years of your journey so far?
I mean, I've had the benefit of coming back into the organizational world right now after a gap of being on my own as an independent consultant, though I worked from outside and during that period too. But at the same time, I don't think some of the basics have changed.
Okay.
At the end of a day, leadership has always been about leading teams, giving direction, giving a vision, and getting the teams to really be motivated to pursuing that. So some of the traits, some of the skills that were always important continue to be important. One of them being decisiveness and taking decisions. Certainly, the speed of change has made it more important to be in terms of the timeliness of decision making. So I think that's something which some leaders may have to adapt to, because the luxury of waiting for the dust to settle on any change and for seeing which way the chips are going to fall before you take a call, those days are not going to be available anymore. I'm reminded of an analogy when you watch a penalty shootout. The goalkeeper always has to take a call and decide to move one way to increase his probability of blocking the ball. Right? He can't wait to see which way the person kicking the ball is kicking it and then make a move. Right? So that's something which people will have to learn, how to be able to anticipate the changes faster, even before full clarity has emerged, and take some calls. Now, those calls, therefore, can often go wrong, just like in a penalty shootout, right? The goalkeeper moves to the left and the ball is kicked to his right. And that would mean that companies will have to learn and leaders will have to learn how to experiment faster, fail faster, and learn from those failures faster. So that you can, rather than waiting for one pristine ideal solution. So you won't get perfection, and timeliness will start becoming important, but yet with sound judgment, best possible application of available data and judgment and experience coming to reduce the probability of error in your choices. So that's the add-on I would make to decisiveness and decision making, is the fact that you have to do it in a context of timeliness and ambiguity of the direction of those changes. And therefore, some of the things that we were chatting earlier is going to become important, that this ability of leaders to be able to zoom in and zoom out, looking at the granular, what's happening, and yet be able to zoom out and take in the big picture, connect seemingly unconnected dots. The earlier you connect the dots, the earlier you spot a possible trend. Right? And that skill then becomes important. Critical thinking, which is how do you feed into those critical decision making, is always important, will continue to be important. A leader's personal credibility and trustworthiness, and for him to be effective leader, to be able to really inspire the confidence in the team, again, was always important, will become more important now. So I'm not sure whether much has really changed between what were the key skills needed then versus the key skills needed now. One perhaps people will have one thing which will become more important is the need to be more empathetic with your team, where earlier times in more stable organizations, people could get on with a leadership style which was more directive, less participative, not so democratic. But with the kind of workforce now, the kind of intellect that they bring in, the kind of choices that they have, the ability to hold that team together will require much greater levels of empathy and flexing your style for different people. I think that aspect may become more important now. See, and it's linked back to the kind of employees coming in now. I mean, gone are the days when people were working because they had to work. People are working because they want to work. And and they want to work in certain kinds of places and certain kinds of environments in certain kind of industries. They're clearly choices linked to their value system, belief system, what they believe is right in the world. There are increasing number of people who will say, I don't want to work in XYZ industries. I want to work in these industries, and irrespective of what salary I get. So how do you create a work environment that can attract the kind of people that you want? It's beyond salary. It's the kind of purpose that you give, the vision that you give, and the environment that you create.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, very well said, because the terminologies of a leader, right from the early eras that we talked about until date, will not change, whether it is decision making, strategic thinking, communication, interpersonal skills, which includes empathy, emotional intelligence. But I think what changes the relevance with respect to the current context,
Right.
with respect to, what's, because today's Gen Zs and the generation is having options and variety of, I think, new jobs that has arrived, which were not there, like a data scientist, analytics. They are just coming up, which was never there in the past. And today we know that how they are shaping up the whole business models altogether. So the leader who is leading a team at a small level, middle size, or at the top level, I think all factors which you mentioned, particularly the empathy, emotional intelligence, gratitude, a lot of these things are going to be very, very important to contextualize. So that we have now grasped based on the leader side, that what kind of skills that are important. Now, I want to also now understand, with the shaping of work that you spoke in the early part, how about the businesses? Because we have a typical Indian companies, and then we have multinational companies, and then we also have startups. And then there are a lot of, mushroom companies which are growing on an individual level, like a clinics, individual people who are building that business. So how the businesses will shape up, keeping the future of work in their mind, how they have to prepare themselves, if we have to look at businesses.
So I'm not seeing seeing a context of saying the variety of businesses which are there. So is your question pertaining to a particular kind of business that I am in, for example, or across the spectrum of
I'm
startup?
asking across the spectrum, because businesses also have to evolve to the workplace. So from that perspective, as all these intelligence, AIs and MLs of the world are coming, how businesses need to adapt, keeping those changes in their mind.
So some of the difference which you're talking of has to do with the stage of evolution of a particular business, right? So the need and the traits of a leader of a startup will automatically change and evolve as the startup matures into a bigger and a more stable organization, right? So those were always there. We always knew that if there's a turnaround needed from a loss-making to a profit-making company, the skill sets are different of the leader which has to achieve the transformation, as against the leader which can drive growth subsequently once you have turned the turnaround, right? And many companies have done that. They brought in a different kind of specialist leader when it's a turnaround task. And once the turnaround has been achieved, then there's a different mindset of a leader which can drive growth. So that's to do with the evolution of the stage of business that a particular business is in. And accordingly, whether the same individual can make that transition, which might be an expectation when it's a family-owned company, because then the same person who did a startup and then now has to develop the ability to grow from whatever stage it has come to a next level of stage. Then that same person who's owning the business and driving the business has to evolve himself into that. Professional companies would find it easier to churn and get, that specialist moves on to some other role and somebody else comes in. But in a family-owned business, the same owner, manager has to evolve himself to those new skills. In terms of really across the spectrum, I think for most of the companies, there's certainly going to be an increasing need for agility and nimbleness, which links back to faster decision making in some ways. But listening better to what the market is telling you, what competitors are telling you, what your own employees are telling you, and responding to that with greater agility. Again, for companies to cope with the emerging trends we talked about of a highly accelerating VUCA, I think leading from the empathy towards employees, the ability to be flexible on many aspects so that you I mean, companies have to increasingly will play the role of a biggest support system that employees have, right?
Yes.
With mobility, you also comes the shattering of social support systems.
Yeah.
People move to other cities, their families are not in the same city.
Yes.
Um, any one of us who has worked in a city as a young couple with a baby without your family next to you or parents next to you knows how big a struggle it is
Yeah.
in India, right? So uh, workplace friends becomes the new friend circle to a great extent. The workplace has to become the biggest support system in the employees' lives.
Yeah.
And those are some of the changes which companies will have to accept and adapt and embrace, not just accept, but really embrace.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Because as I see a lot of technological advancements, the organizations as they evolve in understanding what's changing in their work environment is bringing more good decision making, as you rightly said. I think that is what also comes out in this talk, that how these organizations can do it. So we
Yes.
talked about a bit in terms of the future of work. We talked about what leaders need to do in the changing environment. We also understood about the business. Now, I want to touch upon a very important factor for any organization is the workforce, whether it is the frontline field workforce from our business context that we are in, or for any organization, the people who are the front runners. What would be some of the life learnings or the upskilling that they need to make that can help them to, match the expectations of the future? Something that you want to talk on
Yeah.
that.
So I want to start that answer by giving a very sort of anecdotal recap.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at my father's generation, which is just after independence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole generation went through one kind of education and then got into one kind of company and a job, and they retired from that. I'm broadly generalizing, right? Somebody in the 60s or 50s would have joined the railways or would have joined the Steel Authority of India or coal mines or whatever was the industry opportunities there, or even one of the companies there, and tend to, like the old Japanese loyal model, would retire from that same job.
Correct.
Our generation, same skill set, same education profile, but we changed jobs and we changed industries. But it's the same skill set which saw us through till we retire.
Yeah.
Right. The coming generation will not have that luxury. In their 30 years or 35 years of working life, they will have to constantly reinvent themselves. And therefore, the need for constant reskilling, uh, going back to the drawing board, getting new skills, preparing yourself for the next wave, which is going to come in the job market. That's going to become critical. And therefore, the mindset has to be one of constant learning, right? Of even going back to academia. So the traditional college degree, do it and you've done with it for life and it will see you till retirement. That's not going to happen. That may at best give you a head start of next 5 or 7 years, but you got to be prepared for obsolescence to happen to that.
Yeah.
And so the youngsters coming in would do well to always be in that self-learning mode and take ownership of the skilling that they need to do. Our generation would rely on our companies to figure out our training courses that they sent us to, right?
Yeah.
If you're sticking to a company for a long and you're doing well and your career is going, companies would pace you through the additional skills needed for their progress. But increasingly, individuals will have to take charge of making sure that happens to them if the company is not doing it for them. So that at a very high level is the answer to saying what kind of skilling that the workforce needs to do now. The kind of skilling is difficult to predict. I mean, each one will have to figure out what skill they have, what skill will last for how long before technology or other factors completely create a topsy-turvy situation on that. And can they pick up the new trend or the new emerging piece early enough to really invest in their own skilling? So as somebody explained to me that, people should set aside, just like we used to be told in early days, set aside 10% of your income for savings. Well, now people need to set aside 10% to reinvest in your own education every year.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think very well said, because I think this realization I'm observing also from a coach standpoint, as I look up to a lot of people are now investing because they have realized that, they also know that their loyalty with the organization is not going to be age old. It is going to be limited. And the organizations also understand that.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
expect them to come prepared, and they are paid accordingly, and then they have to also work towards their own world. That's what I think is happening as a
And, and as a result, companies are also now having to hire for skills rather than for set roles.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you need to hire, and employees need to recognize that people will hire for fungible skills.
yeah,
The paradigms may change, the technology may change, but what is fungible across that is your attitude, your learning agility, and your adaptability to change circumstances. So skills and traits which feed into that volatile world, or you can skim the choppy waves well. That skill is what people will look for.
yeah. I think that also reminds me a very important outcome that happened in our recent ad board when the LinkedIn team, which was sitting in our ad board, and somebody asked them that, how do you ensure that you pay decently to the people who are coming? He says that we don't look at the pay, we look at their skill set that they bring, and then we pay accordingly.
Right.
So it's not a traditional way that you will have to come for a role specific. We look at what you can offer, and then they pay.
Yeah.
So I think that's already happening. Now, I think one important area which I felt, and I thought asking this question to you specifically is, so let's say you are in your late 50s or you are touching your 60s, hopefully.
I'm
And,
over 60.
huh?
I'm over 60.
You're over 60. So I'm sure a young person who is joining your team, okay, he must be in his early 20s, she or he, and there is a generational effect. Differences, I would say. So tell me, this is definitely going to happen to all of us. Even the guy, I was 20, you were 20 at some point of time. But this time of evolving work is different from maybe somebody 20 years back, because that was not so advanced at that time. Now, how this generational difference is going to impact looking at the future of work?
So
What's
I
your
think
thoughts?
I think part of diversity acceptance is the fact that even the new generation accepts that diversity, right? As long as the attitudes are one of mutual respect
Yeah,
and capabilities which are recognized, right? And like I said, more empathy, more democratic way of functioning, so that the older person is not throwing his weight around, either because of the sheer age. मैं इतना बड़ा हूँ तो इसलिए respect करो, as long as it's not that, and you're not throwing weight around because of your designation,
yeah,
right? And you respect. I mean, I remember reading many years ago an article on Marico, where the senior management and Mariwala created a a system where the youngsters were coming in and the seniors were told that you got to learn digital marketing from them,
yeah,
right? And that became a huge thing which was talked about, and I presume it helped a lot of the seniors to really get to know what digital marketing is all about in a
yeah,
company which was used to mass media and television and so on and so forth.
yeah,
So I think diversity and acceptance of diversity has to cut across everybody. It's not just older people need to accept the Gen Z, but also the Gen Z needs to then say, okay, I respect the skill and the wisdom and the experience that the person has, as long as that's working in my favor, as long as I can draw upon it for my own mentoring and learning, and as long as the person gives me the space to still come up with my thoughts and views, right? And not just be expected to do what I've been told. So it works both ways.
yeah. I agree, and I also kind of see a big challenge in this space. People, when they cross their, I would say, 40s and they enter into their 50s, they become very rigid. They become very orthodox, and that's where the challenge comes. That I have seen a lot of people coming and telling, how can वो मुझे ऐसा कैसे बोल सकता है? How can he say like this to me? How can he
Yeah.
come and walk into with a t-shirt in my office? Something like that.
Right.
They are not ready to accept, as you use the right word, they have to accept the diversity. But at what level, I don't know. That is something a question mark.
Yeah. So I guess I think it's an individual journey for everybody and individuals. I've always been a person which enjoys a lot of debate and discussion. Uh, my bosses have often told me and labeled me as argumentative, so I've done that with my bosses. But with my subordinates, I encourage that and I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
And everyone has an if we are middle of a discussion, then I lose sight of difference in experience and rank, as long as the person is saying and has a point which is valid. I may disagree with it, and I'll push back and I'll argue, and try to convince the other person, as long as the other person has the right to try to convince me and continue arguing with me. Right. So that is one part. The other part is, I guess, somewhere, late marriage and late kids still keeps me grounded, because I have now kids who are still just out of their teens, and sort of I have experience at home, their pushback. So
Yeah,
many other things. So that keeps me grounded, I guess.
yeah. So I think, thank you, Rajneesh. I think this topic is so engrossed that we can talk and talk on this. But wonderful insights coming out as more we are, talking and building on this. So I took some questions that came to me from my audience itself. So thank you so very much for sharing your valuable insights, thoughts. But before we close this, I still want you to say one message to all the people who are aspiring or who are in their leadership role. What would you tell them that what they should look up to in the next 5 years? That one message that you want to give them.
I think for everybody, the distinction between leader and manager has to get blurred. We all have to recognize that all of us, even as we are leading, also got a managerial task. And similarly, all managers are also leaders within the sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean managers. Even the junior person is a leader for that small territory which he is handling or she is handling. So that terminology is often divisive, right? Just like I don't like the divide between strategy and execution, right? It is always strategy and execution which goes hand in hand. In a stable world, you could have one head office making strategy and then say, okay, next 5 years, everybody execute it. But in the dynamic world, it's a constant, one feeds into the other constantly.
Yeah.
Similarly, between leadership and management, so managing something. So that's one broad message, that learn to delegate. If you want junior managers to be leaders in their sphere of influence, then their responsibility must come with their authority.
Yeah.
And that's something which often senior leaders don't do well enough.
Yeah.
So that's one key message to almost every people manager.
Thank you so very much. Once again, a nice thing came out of your wisdom. Thank you so very much. And pleasure having you here on this show. And hopefully we get another opportunity in some time. We'll again, we'll love to have you back here. And
My
thanks
pleasure.
for your time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat. And oftentimes, so many things over our life we seem to have learned, but being forced to articulate it makes it clearer in my own mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that.
And thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank you. Good night. Yeah.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.